Welcome. Welcome to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's public meeting of its Consumer Advisory Board, or the CAB, as we like to call it. Today's CAB public meeting will gather public feedback about the consumer finance issues facing new Americans and is taking place at the Japanese American National Museum in downtown Los Angeles. My name is Sixa Martinez. I am the Associate Director for External Affairs at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or the CFPB. En español, somos la Oficina para la Protección Financiera del Consumidor. The CFPB is a new independent federal agency whose mission is to help consumer finance markets work by making rules more effective, by consistently and fairly enforcing those rules, and by empowering consumers to take more control over their economic lives. As many of you may know, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, which created the CFPB, also provided for the establishment of the CFPB's Consumer Advisory Board in order to advise and consult with the CFPB in the exercise of its functions and to provide information on emerging practices in the consumer financial products and services industry, including regional trends, concerns, and other relevant information. Today's CAB meeting is in support of this mission. Today's public meeting is also being live streamed at consumerfinance.gov, and you can follow CFPB on Twitter and Facebook. Our audience today includes community leaders, advocates, industry representatives, and of course, consumers. We're also pleased to welcome staff from the Office of Congressman Xavier Becerra, who represents California's 34th Congressional District, and staff from the Office of Congressman Tony Cardenas, who represents California's 29th Congressional District. I'll spend just a few minutes telling you about what you can expect at today's public meeting. First, you'll hear remarks from Director Cordray, after which the Bureau's Assistant Director for Consumer Engagement, Peter Jackson, will preview CFPB in Español. Then, the CAB's chair, Jose Quiñones, along with the CFPB's Acting Deputy Director, Steve Antonakis, will facilitate a discussion among CAB members and a community panel of experts about the consumer finance trends and themes facing new Americans. Following the panel discussion, there will be an opportunity to hear from audience participants. The audience participation portion of the public meeting provides audience members with the opportunity to share their observations in response to today's discussion. As a reminder, the views of the CAB and the views of the community panel are their views and are greatly appreciated. They do not represent the views of the CFPB. So let's get started with an introduction of the CAB members and the CFPB staff participating in today's public meeting. The chair is Jose Quiñones. Jose Quiñones is the Executive Director of Mission Asset Fund in San Francisco, California. The vice chair is Bill Bynum. Bill Bynum is the CEO of Hope Enterprise Corporation in Jackson, Mississippi. Gary Acosta. Gary Acosta is the Executive Chairman of New Vista Asset Management in San Diego, California, and he's a founding leader of the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. Joanne Barefoot. Joanne Barefoot is co-chair of Treliant Risk Advisors in Washington, D.C. Don Baylor. Don Baylor is a senior policy analyst for economic opportunity at the Center for Public Policy Priorities in Austin, Texas. Maeve Brown. Maeve Brown is the Executive Director of Housing and Economic Rights Advocates in Oakland, California. Steve Carlson. Steve Carlson is the Head of Marketing and Business Development at Mint.com at Intuit in Mountain View, California. Laura Castro de Cortez. Laura is Vice President of Alternative Financial Solutions at Centrus Federal Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska. Elizabeth Kostel. Elizabeth Kostel is the Director for Consumer and State Affairs at the AARP Public Policy Institute in Virginia. Prentice Cox. Professor Cox is Associate Professor of Law at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Patty Hassan. Patty Hassan is the President and Executive Director of Clarifa in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Patricia Garcia Duarte. Patricia Garcia Duarte is the Director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Phoenix in Phoenix, Arizona. Adam Levitin. Professor Levitin is the Bruce W. Nichols Visiting Professor of Law at Harvard Law School and a Professor of Law at Georgetown Law School in Washington, D.C. Jennifer Misery. Jennifer is the Deputy Director of Young Invisibles in Washington, D.C. William Nelson. William Nelson is the Executive Director of USA Cares in Radcliffe, Kentucky. Dory Rand. Dory Rand is the President of the Woodstock Institute in Chicago, Illinois. The Honorable Annette Rizzo. Judge Rizzo is a judge at the First Judicial District of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Ellen Seidman. Ellen is the chair of the Board of Directors of the Center for Financial Services Innovation in Washington, D.C. Josh Silverman. Josh Silverman is President for U.S. Consumer Services at American Express in New York. Robert Stoll. Robert Stoll is the founder of Stoll Burney LLC in Portland, Oregon. Jane Thompson. Jane Thompson is the CEO and founder of Jane J. Thompson LLC in Chicago, Illinois. And Jonathan Zinman. Professor Zinman is an associate professor at Dartmouth College in Andover, New Hampshire. We also have with us Delicia Hand. She is CFPB staff director for the CAB, and we also have CFPB's acting deputy director and associate director for the Bureau's Supervision, Enforcement, and Fair Lending Division, Steve Antonakis. I'm now pleased to introduce Richard Cordray. Prior to his current role, Director Cordray led the CFPB's Enforcement Office. Before that, he served on the front lines of consumer protection as Ohio's Attorney General. In that role, he recovered more than $2 billion for Ohio's retirees, investors, and business owners, and took major steps to help protect its consumers from fraudulent foreclosures and financial predators. Before serving as Ohio Attorney General, he also served as an Ohio State Representative, Ohio Treasurer, and Franklin County Treasurer. Director Cordray.
Thank you, Zixta. We're excited to be hosting this Consumer Advisory Board meeting on the West Coast, and we're especially pleased to be here in Los Angeles, or City of Our Lady, Queen of the Angels, in its non-abbreviated Spanish version, fittingly enough for our topic today. It's also a special treat to be here at the Japanese American Museum, where we can celebrate the contributions and achievements of this community to the United States of America over many years, and see in its stark and most candid form the kinds of discrimination and mistreatment this community, as so many communities, have had to overcome to be full-fledged American citizens. To see the wall of suitcases and trunks that Hirokazu Kozaka created downstairs to put this into everyday form, the sort of tragedy that people went through with Japanese American internment, is impossible not to be moved. Apparently, Denzel Washington once said, "In Los Angeles, everyone is a star." Obviously not true, but we've come here seeking some of that stardust for the people we serve. At the very least, every one of you who took time to be here today is a consumer finance star, and your input is integral to our mission of improving how markets work for consumers in this country. When I spoke to the board earlier this year at the last meeting, I laid out some of the problems and dynamics we've been seeing on multiple fronts. With your help, we've been working diligently to address these issues. Today, I will focus on the crucial task of connecting with consumers, which we must do well in order to help them properly. In particular, it's important that we connect with those who may be new to the American economy and in need of sensible protections. When I served in state and local office in Ohio, I began to take part in naturalization ceremonies, which I found to be as moving and inspiring as anything I've ever encountered in our government. To me, these festive occasions fully embody what Walt Whitman called these United States, a nation of nations. People still are coming from all over the world through fascinating personal journeys with a deep determination to become our fellow citizens. Just think of that. Think about turning your whole world upside down because you have the courage and the optimism to stake your life on trying something entirely new. And for people to want to do that by coming to America, that is the single highest compliment they could pay to this country. People overcome the obstacles to make a new home among us because they share our ideals. They believe in this nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all are created equal. At these events, I'm deeply humbled to hear the fascinating stories of how our newest compatriots have managed to make their way here, self-consciously choosing to earn for themselves the same freedoms and future prospects that I have simply and happily known because of the accident of my birthplace. For many of those who come to this country, the American dream offers an opportunity to work hard, not only to support themselves and their immediate families, but also to help support the loved ones they left behind and may never see again. International money transfers, known as remittances, from the United States to Latin America are estimated by researchers to total billions or even tens of billions of dollars each year. Just last month, we finalized our remittance rule that will bring new protections to those who send money abroad. Before now, little or no protection existed for those sending remittance transfers. Many have lacked confidence in this marketplace and may have chosen instead to risk the hazards of sending money internationally by mail or to bear the inconvenience of waiting to entrust it to someone who could carry it for them to the intended destination. In the wake of finalizing the new remittance rule, we're hearing that other countries are watching closely to see how the new process works out and are considering the adoption of similar provisions to govern remittance transfers by their citizens as well. As is the case in all financial markets, a better and sounder process will build consumer confidence and attract consumer demand over time. New disclosures mean that all consumers will now be better aware of fees and exchange rates before they send money. When they can know and understand the terms ahead of time, they will be better able to shop around for the best deal. New protections against errors should also bolster confidence that this mechanism for transferring funds is worthy of trust. The rule will take effect in the fall, and we're working closely with industry to make sure they understand these provisions and can implement them effectively. And the Consumer Bureau will be in a position to ensure that the law is enforced in an even-handed manner so that all competitors will be playing by the same new requirements. At the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, we earnestly believe in the fundamental principles of openness and fairness. We know that financial products and services represent much more than mere transactions or forms. They actually define the ways and means of our everyday lives. Consumers deserve to have the clear information they need to make good choices, choices that enhance their lives and empower them to succeed. We see financial literacy and financial capability as essential components of citizenship. It is important to learn not only how to participate in our democracy, but also how to play an important role in the free market economy that is so foundational to the arrangement of our society. And so we're now making a strong push for making more personal finance education available to everyone in this country. Our efforts range from methods of instruction for students enrolled in our K-12 schools to a new Money Smart curriculum for older Americans that we're currently developing together with the FDIC. Like many consumers, immigrant communities may struggle to understand consumer financial products and services. Their struggles are compounded by cultural adjustments and language barriers, which can make them prime targets for exploitation. Recognizing these challenges, we wanted to provide our Spanish-speaking audience with access to clear, unbiased information about financial products and services. Therefore, today we're unveiling CFPB en Español. More than 50 million Latinos are living in the United States today. They represent 1 out of 6 Americans, and that proportion is rising. Notably, among those Latinos who are online, nearly 2/3 of them tend to access the internet from a mobile device. CFPB en Español represents our first foray into mobile technology. The members of the board saw a demonstration of it earlier today. We started with Ask CFPB, which is our interactive, user-friendly database to help answer consumers' questions in plain language. It is an objective information resource for consumers. We took 250 of the Ask CFPB questions and answers, and we've now published them in Spanish. We also optimized the content so it can be easily viewed on both a computer and a mobile device. At the same time, we've been translating a number of our informational brochures into Spanish also. We hope to use today's discussion to build on this work. We want to expand our website to include more Spanish resources and then to build more tools in other languages so that we can reach as many consumers as effectively as possible. We also are mindful of our responsibility to make sure that the costs, risks, and terms of financial products and services are understandable for consumers. We believe that foreign language disclosures and customer service communications are critical parts of this broader responsibility. As Congress sensibly directed, the remittance rule requires that where companies advertise in a foreign language, they must be able to provide mandatory disclosures in that same language. We're also testing Spanish language forms as part of our project to integrate and streamline federal mortgage disclosures. As we learn from these initial projects, we intend to engage in a broader dialogue about how providers of consumer financial products and services can address foreign language issues and the Bureau's role in improving communications. In situations where certain providers are deliberately using language barriers as a means of exploitation, such as bait-and-switch tactics in different languages, we will be particularly concerned that this approach is not being used to trip up consumers. In all of our efforts, hearing from the public is critical to help us assess how best to use our tools to improve the workings of consumer financial markets. We encourage consumers to tell us their personal stories on our website at www.consumerfinance.gov. And people can submit consumer complaints about mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, bank accounts, credit reporting, and remittances. We also take complaints over the telephone in more than 180 languages, including Spanish, at 855-411-CFPB. We want all consumers, including those newest to our country, to know that they have a place to turn when they have a problem with a consumer financial product or service. The customer may not always be right, but the customer certainly deserves to have someone who will take the time to listen and, where justified and appropriate, try to do something about it. At the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, our mission is to make consumer financial markets work for consumers and to protect people against predatory practices. Engaging with and educating consumers is essential to that mission. Today, we've unveiled new ways to connect with Spanish-speaking consumers that complement our existing consumer tools. We will continue to build up our capacity to reach consumers, particularly those who are new to this country, and who may be struggling to overcome language and cultural barriers to finding the opportunity that attracted them to America in the first place. Some of us are first-generation Americans, some are second-generation, some have forebears who have been here longer. But we're all the same when it comes to expecting and deserving a fair shake. We're all the same in deserving finally to have someone who will stand on our side, protect us against fraud, and see to it we're treated fairly in the financial marketplace. That is what drives our work at the Consumer Bureau, and that is what we're determined to do for this country. I look forward to our discussions today and to hearing your thoughts on these topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cordray. Next, we have Peter Jackson, the Bureau's Assistant Director for Consumer Engagement, who will preview CFPB en Español. Peter?
Thank you, Zixta. My name is Peter Jackson, and I am the Assistant Director for Consumer Engagement at the CFPB. At the CFPB, we have three very powerful tools that we can use to protect the consumers that we're here to serve and to meet our mission as Congress has dictated it to us. One of those is the ability to write rules that bind the financial services industry. Another is to enforce those rules through our supervision, fair lending, and enforcement program. But I'm here today to talk about a third tool, an equally powerful tool, engaging and educating the American public to enable them to make the smartest financial decisions for themselves and for their families. So here at the CFPB, we're committed to serving all consumers, regardless of their walk of life. But we chose to begin our New Americans and Immigrant Communities effort online by starting with the Latino community, for many of the reasons that Director Cordray outlined earlier. This is part of our work to engage an emerging and growing population here in the United States. Why? Well, as Director Cordray said, 1 in 6 consumers are Latino, and 37 million Latinos primarily speak Spanish at home. This community is growing, it's thriving, and it's one that the CFPB is committed to serving. When we first started this project, we began with research, trying to understand who is this audience and how could we develop resources and information that would serve them best. And we broke this group of Spanish-speaking consumers here in the United States down into 3 audiences. The first actually prefers English. They're English first, but is fluent in Spanish. They speak it at home with their family members and with their friends, but they prefer to transact financial services business in the English language. The second audience is fluent in both languages, both Spanish and English, but they prefer to speak Spanish, and dealing with very complicated and very consequential financial decisions, their native language of Spanish is preferred. And finally, a third audience, those for whom Spanish is the language that they communicate in mostly or almost exclusively. And so in thinking about how we were going to go about trying to serve this audience, we began by thinking about these 3 groups. Knowing who it is that we wanted to serve, how did we go about building something that meets this community's needs? You know, design isn't just about fonts and colors and logo marks and graphic design and layout. It's really about creating something for people that's useful, that's understandable, and really something that meets people where they are, not where we want them to be. At the CFPB, we believe in a consumer-centered design philosophy, putting the consumer at the core of everything it is that we do. And as an agency born out of crisis, in fact, the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, we're committed to elevating the voices of consumers all across this country and everything that we do so that we can serve them best. That's why we began this project, by talking with Spanish-speaking consumers, Latino community advocates, and companies that are already quite successful at reaching and engaging with these consumers in this audience. We actually started by sketching out 3 very simple websites, one for each of those different groups that I spoke of earlier. And then we took them back out to these same folks, community advocates, Spanish-speaking consumers, and we tested them. With insights in hand, we built what I'm going to demonstrate here shortly. But I want to be clear about something. Our work doesn't start there. This is actually just the beginning of our work to engage with the Spanish-speaking communities, the Latino population here in the United States. In order for our work to be successful, we have to constantly be learning, constantly be gathering new insights from our users, from these consumers, bringing them to bear, and making changes, iterating, and building new offerings and new capabilities that serve them. So I'd like to share 4 of our design principles. And the demonstration that I'll give in a second will show how these translate into CFPB en Espanol. So the first is, how might we build trust? You know, a former president once said that the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help." There's a large bar for us to overcome in order to be able to serve consumers all across this land. But if any government agency should know, what are your rights under the laws and regulations that govern consumer financial services? It ought to be the CFPB. If anybody should be able to help you understand what your options are when things go wrong in your financial life, it ought to be the CFPB. And so from that foundation, we're attempting to build trust through our design for a Spanish-speaking audience. Building on this theme of trust, how might we speak in a native voice to this community? Auto translation simply does not meet the high bar that we've set for ourselves at the CFPB. In fact, as this project was underway over the last few weeks, every couple of days I got a link to check out the latest progress to see how things were going. And my web browser very helpfully offered to automatically translate everything that I was seeing back into English. So I tried it a couple of times, and it didn't work. In fact, our user research found that words that are quite common in the English language carry entirely different meanings when used in the Spanish language. And so we decided that we would build from the ground up with native speakers who are working to create the information that's on this website, as well as working on our design and development teams. We didn't just replicate what we've already done for a different audience. We found out what we believe this audience needed the most and started from there. We've discovered many principles for design that are unique to this specific community, but there are also some very similar ones. I'll give you one example. We still have yet to find a consumer who wakes up in the morning and says, I want to take out $200,000 sometime this month. What they do is they wake up and they say, I want to buy the house on the corner with a white picket fence. I want to send my son or my daughter to college. This idea of organizing information not around the specific financial products that people might encounter, but around the situation that they're in, is one that we found cuts across our English-speaking communities that we serve and the Spanish-speaking communities we're trying to serve now with CFPB on Espanol. Finally, mobile-friendly design is key to reaching this audience. Mobile internet use is growing fastest among Latinos here in the United States, and our research showed that this is primarily how they're going to be able to find this information and what the CFPB can provide. We also know that they're not going to download a mobile app just to get an answer to, what are my rights if my interest rate is raised by my credit card issuer. That's simply too high of a barrier to entry for them to cross. So our last principle is that this needs to work just as well on your home computer, your work computer, at a library, or on the phone while you're on the go. So let's talk about how it is that we building trust into CFPB on Espanol. Right here on the homepage of consumerfinance.gov, across the entire site, we've added a new banner that allows you to switch between our English site and our Spanish site. So if we click in the top right corner for CFPB on Espanol, you'll see that we've actually devoted a tremendous amount of screen real estate to just a very simple and clear statement. Who is the CFPB and what are we able to do for you as a consumer of financial products and services? We also use the power of video storytelling, in fact, done by somebody here at the CFPB who can speak to Spanish language consumers in their own language, our Associate Director for External Affairs, Zixta Martinez. We also wanted to highlight something that many consumers, English-speaking and Spanish-speaking alike, don't know, which is that you can simply pick up the phone and give us a call and talk to someone right there about your problem with a financial service, a product, a situation that you may have found yourself in. Moving on to this idea of not auto-translating and sort of building on what we do in consumer response, you can also pick up the phone and call consumer response if you have a question about what are your rights, how does something work, and wanted to forefront that for consumers as well as show them that if they did need to file a complaint, what does that process look like? When will they hear back from the CFPB or from the company that they're filing a complaint about? And what is our role and their role throughout that whole process? Finally, based on research with Latino community advocates, we prioritized what information, what content was going to be most relevant to this specific audience. Figuring out where we should actually start and where we needed to head out from there. In fact, with the help of our Consumer Advisory Board, we were able to connect with an organization here in Los Angeles, the Families and Schools organization, that worked with us in the development of the site that is being shown on the screens behind me. Finally, this idea of situations is one that's common, as I said earlier, across all audiences. And so what we tried to do is make it easy to navigate. So if you go into a particular question, for example, about buying a home, along the right side of the screen, you can see related terms about this issue. So you can learn more about this particular subject. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are some questions for which there are related issues. Maybe you read through the question and realized, wait, this wasn't the information I was looking for. We've tried to tag and highlight the other information that might be relevant. But to this idea of continuous improvement, always seeking feedback from the consumers we're here to serve, we asked the question, did this answer your question? And if not, we want to know why. Maybe it was too long or it was kind of confusing. Or maybe you think we got the answer wrong for some reason. And we provide users the ability to tell us that, and we incorporate that feedback on a regular basis into the information that we provide for consumers online and on the phone through our consumer response hotline. Lastly, this idea that this should work no matter whether you're at home or on a mobile device or at a library is we're going to kind of try and demonstrate what this might look like if it were on your mobile phone. The buttons get a lot bigger. It's a lot harder to hit what you're looking for with your thumb or with your finger than it is with a mouse. The menu up at the top collapses into a familiar icon that allows you to bring up and bring down the various different resources on the site. The other thing that happens is that the elements change order. So when I'm at home and I'm on my computer, I've got a keyboard, and so searching is actually a very easy activity to do. But when you're on a mobile device, typing in a search term can actually be a lot more difficult. So we've moved the search bar all the way to the bottom of the page and made it easier for people to navigate with the icons up at the top. So what's next? You know, even as we were building, we continued doing research, we continued learning about this audience that we're trying to serve. And after doing more research, we now believe that there are actually 4 ways to think about this audience. So if you look at the, on this next slide here, the boxes on the left side, the idea is to kind of sort of measure these different groups' comfortableness, their comfort rather, speaking and writing in English and in Spanish. And so the darker the green is, the more comfort they have working in that language. This first group, you might even think of it as the dreamer audience, or first and second generation Americans. They're serving themselves with this information, but perhaps more importantly, they're providing a conduit to their parents and their relatives to understand complex financial decisions. Our second audience is turning to their friends and to their families for advice, and we don't really see them as direct users of this site. They get their financial information elsewhere. So the question for the CFPB is, how do we connect with these intermediaries? How do we provide them this information so they can pass it along so that every consumer here in the United States has what they need in order to make an informed decision? Our third audience is looking for this kind of help. They're similar to this second group, but they're actively looking for information about paying for college and buying a car and for owning a home. And finally, just as there are on our consumer advisory board all across this country, there are dedicated advocates out there who are trying to help consumers make ends meet and make smart financial decisions. And we want to empower them with the best information possible to do that very important work. So from here, we'll continue migrating a lot of the information that we have on our English language site, building from the ground up with native Spanish speakers at the CFPB. We'll continue collecting user feedback. In fact, earlier today, just across the way over here in the other building, we had a great session with folks who came and tried out using our site, answered a short survey after it was over. That information, along with all sorts of other information that we're able to collect, allows us to prioritize what's next, to add new capabilities and new features, ones that this community will find useful. And we'll continue refining content based upon what people say as they're reading these questions and answers and providing us with feedback. But remember, this is only the beginning. This is just the first step in an offering to serve Spanish-speaking consumers across the United States. In closing, you know, in the years leading up to the financial crisis, there were play-by-the-rules consumers all across this country, hardworking consumers who were trying to make smart financial choices. There were honest businesses that were committed to serving these consumers with good quality financial products. And there were consumer advocates as well. And all of these people, and many of them, saw that there was a problem in consumer finance coming, that there was something going on in the housing market. The CFPB was created to be the one agency in Washington to watch out for consumers that are taking out mortgages, that need to borrow money in order to buy a car, and use other forms of consumer financial products and services, in essence, to access their dreams. The CFPB, we're here to serve all of the consumers in this country, and that means elevating the voices of them into everything that we do. CFPB en Español is just one effort for us to do that. Thank you for allowing me to show off one of our projects here at the CFPB today, and please visit consumerfinance.gov, take a look, and let us know what you think.
Thank you, Peter. Next, we have a panel of community experts. The CAB chair, Jose Quiñones, has been the executive director of Mission Asset Fund in San Francisco, California since 2007. His previous positions include California Outreach Director for the Center for Responsible Lending in Oakland. He also worked in Washington, D.C. at the Center for Community Change, Bread for the World, and on Capitol Hill. Steve Antonakis joined the CFPB in November 2010 as the Assistant Director of Large Bank Supervision and was named the Associate Director for Supervision Enforcement and Fair Lending in June 2012. His background includes more than 2 decades as a financial services regulator. In January of this year, he was named as the Acting Deputy Director and is currently holding both jobs. Jose and Steve, you have the floor.
Great. Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you, Zixta, and let me thank all of you for coming out and participating in our session today. Jose and I are going to facilitate the next discussion, and really, as Director Cordray discussed at the Bureau, we are seeking to respond to all consumers, the needs of all consumers, including those that for which English is a second language, and for new Americans as well. We're now going to hear from invited guests, and these folks are representatives of financial institutions, of businesses, their advocates, and their housing counselors as well. Our Consumer Advisory Board will pose questions to the invited representatives, and those of us both on the board and representatives of the CFPB will listen. From the conversation, we really hope to learn more about ways in which our new website, CFPB and Espanol, can be further expanded and developed to address the experiences of new Americans in the marketplace. Also should point out that this will also be exceptionally informative for us as we look to roll out further language capability for our website as well. After we have heard from the invited panelists, we will open up this meeting for comment from members of the public in attendance today as well. So now please allow me to introduce our invited panelists. And if I could ask our panelists to raise their hand when I introduce them. Graziella Aponte, Center for Responsible Lending. Olivia Calderon, City of Los Angeles Community Development Department. Danielle Rodriguez, East Los Angeles Community Corporation. Yvonne Maria Jimenez, Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles. Miriam Mesa, Coalition of Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. Amy Phillips, Little Tokyo Service Center. Aquilena Soriano Veraso, Filipino Workers Center of Southern California. Dr. Pauli Cruz Takash, UCLA North American Integration and Development Center. Marisabel Torres, National Council of La Raza. And Hee Yu Jun, Korean Resource Center. Thank you for participating. Jose?
Great, thank you for that, Steve. It is a pleasure to be here in Los Angeles talking about this very important topic of how to think about the issues that are facing new Americans, immigrants, in the financial marketplace. I mean, this could not be a more timely discussion for us all, because what we're going through right now is actually having a conversation about immigration reform in general. So when we're talking about the 50 million Latinos in the country, we really are talking much more when we're thinking about immigrants in general, and how we're not just integrating the financial marketplace, but integrating in society overall. So this discussion, what we learn from this discussion, I think is going to help us sort of rethink and reshape, the way we understand the problems, and trying to figure out how to best address those problems with real solutions in the way that Richard Cordray sort of spoke about this afternoon. At the CAB, the Consumer Advisory Board, as you saw, we are comprised of very diverse. Some people calls us eclectic group. I think there's actually there's some truth to that, but eclectic in a really good way. I think we are a very diverse group of people with a very diverse experiences and perspectives, and I think that was not by mistake. I think it was done by design, right? Because we want to sort of hear about the different problems and from different perspectives, both from consumer, consumer level, and also even from folks from industry, so that way we can better understand the nature of the problem and provide better advice and counsel to the CFPB. So I'm very excited to be part of this group, and also to kind of dive into this very specific topic that is very close and dear to my own heart. I mean, this is really what I do, and this is my paid job, frankly. So I wanted to sort of bring in, start bringing in some of the CAB members into this conversation. And again, we've formulated some notions of questions here, but, Patricia, I know that, you are also, this is a topic that is near and dear to your heart, given your work in Phoenix with the neighborhood housing services that you provide. I know you work with immigrants day in, day out, and I know you have some questions related to, from your own experiences in helping people transition into the financial mainstream. So I want to see if you can come in and pose a question to our panelists. It's not on. So can you try? Yeah. Try again.
No.
So maybe, no. Well, this one works. There you go.
Does she want?
Can you try?
Hello? Can you guys hear me? No?
No.
How about I?
Let's do that. Yeah, we're amongst family here, so.
So I'm curious, in anticipation of immigration reform, curious what new immigrant communities should be doing now to prepare, and at the same time, what should financial institutions, on the same token, be doing to prepare for what we anticipate in immigration reform, to prepare new immigrants to participate in the financial marketplace?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. Hi. That's a wonderful question. I'll start out by saying that we are so close to the passage of immigration reform. This is a wonderful opportunity for so many people in this country who are just on the precipice of fully integrating into American society. And this is a wonderful opportunity, not only obviously for them to achieve citizenship, but we really do see a lot of differences in the levels of financial integration between people who are immigrants who have naturalized and those who have not. So again, not only is this a wonderful opportunity for citizenship, but also as a platform, as Jose has said, and to echo the director's comments, for financial integration. And so we should really take this moment, it's a very teachable moment, the moment of citizenship, to help people, with the financial integration issues that we'll be discussing here a little bit later. Citizenship truly is an asset for people. That's the way that we like to frame it. And so before I speak to what the community can do, I just want to say that foremost, we should really be aware that there's a lot of barriers right now standing in the way of people who are eligible to naturalize today without even immigration reform passing, for whom eligibility is not an issue, but the barrier is the financial cost. So affordability is really a huge issue that we need to be paying attention to. And for that, the solution is to make sure that there are responsible, safe, and affordable products for people to take advantage of to help them with this. People are able to save. Obviously, we know that the immigrant community is wonderful at saving. They don't have a lot of, cash or capital necessarily, but when you don't have a lot of money, you keep track of where that money goes. So they're actually very savvy at navigating that aspect of it. But to the extent that maybe it's not just one person who will need to naturalize, maybe it's a family of 4 or more, where can they seek resources? So that's playing into the financial market piece of it, that you need to make sure that there are responsible products for people to access. And so I'll say that savings and credit products, innovation is taking place right now. I'm sure that Jose won't give himself kudos, but Mission Asset Fund is an organization right here in California, in the Bay Area, who has been tackling this issue through social loans. So there's a number of ways to connect people to ways that they already are familiar with navigating the financial world, but connecting this to the mainstream financial system. Jose's model will connect loans to a credit building platform. So we know that immigrants tend to have thin credit files, not as much access to credit. His model actually connects people to a non-traditional form of building credit. So making sure that the financial space is ready. It's 11 million people estimated to be undocumented who could potentially take advantage of immigration reform. So that's a huge need. And to leave that need unmet in the financial world would be a huge miss on our part.
Let the record show that I did not pay her to say that, but I should. So. But Dr. Takash, I wanted to bring you into this conversation as well, just to see if you can give us some more insights into the issue.
Thank you very much. I wanted to let the audience know that I run a research center here at UCLA called the North American Integration and Development Center, and we've worked for about 16 years on all aspects of immigration and the comprehensive immigration reform. Also, we're weighing in on in Washington D.C. and locally as well. We also have been working for over a decade on issues of how do you use the new technologies, internet platforms, and card technologies and mobile phones to be able to provide low-cost and efficient financial services for poor and low-income folks. And that includes immigrants, but it also includes everyone who falls in that category. So we're working with African Americans, poor white folks, everybody. On that note, what I wanted to say is that in answer to your question, in terms of immigrants, I'm an anthropologist as well, and I work on the ground in the communities side by side with our immigrant groups. And what I have learned over time is that what we need to also be asking is, what are these folks doing now? How they have financial needs, and so how are they themselves? What are the initiatives that they have taken to solve these financial needs that they've had? And they're pretty expert at a lot of these things. So I think that our institutions, the community-based, faith-based organizations, anyone working with on these topics, also one of the first steps is to find out what are folks already doing. They're not waiting for the immigration reform to happen yet to be able to address these things, right? And so that's one of the first steps, I think. Some of the organizations, I don't know if they're represented here, but right down the street we have COFEM, and COFEM is a confederation of federations. They represent 9 different Mexican states and one organization, a soccer club that has become much more than that. And they have as one of their programs looking at and educating their membership about financial issues and financial education, but also financial services. They have an extra burden that they've taken on because they're working transnationally. So they're also looking at financial institutions, the lack of services, the lack of banks in the hometowns and in the states where they're coming from as well. So they're working transnationally as well as domestically here. So we have a lot to learn from them also. I would say that another case comes to mind, and that's the Casa Maryland. That was founded many years ago by Salvadorans and North American U.S. citizens. They have 35,000 members, and they've just approached us to ask, how do we use these new technologies to be able to provide low-cost services to our members, even though the mainstream banks, Bank of America, Chase, et cetera, Wells Fargo, has already approached them about providing them with financial services. They're looking for innovation. They're looking for institutions and organizations that are going to not see the challenges in terms of status, et cetera, as being barriers to them having access to these kinds of needed services. So, and they're among many different immigrant organizations that, again, we need to be consulting and having here at these kinds of forums. The thing that occurs to me, and what I generally look at regardless of what the issue is, I look at the structural barriers to access. And so when we're talking about what can the institutions, the mainstream institutions, but also the alternative services institutions, what can they be doing? We need to be very concretely looking at what have been the existing structural barriers to allowing these folks to have access to checking accounts, savings accounts, etc. In my findings, these folks don't lack for knowledge about how to do this. They lack access. And so what can we do in terms of regulations? What can we do in terms of the institutions themselves being able to say, we're going to amplify the kinds of legal government documents that we can use in order to allow folks to open up accounts, etc. So the structural barriers, I think that we have some of our major financial providers, MasterCard. Everyone has seen, this the potential to make money also, and economically. So we have MasterCard, who's just launched a huge financial literacy national financial literacy program. They're putting money into doing financial education so that they should be going to a COFEM and those kinds of organizations to be able to help fortify those efforts that those organizations are already engaged in. So those are again, I would say the structural barriers. This is less an issue about how do we teach the immigrants, basic steps, etc. And I've gone to some of those financial literacy programs where they bring out a great big check and say, this is how you sign a check. That's not what folks need. They're there. They're past that. And so again, I would say, we need to be thinking at what are the structural barriers that have existed? How do we bring those down? How do we facilitate? How do we educate ourselves in terms of what the folks already are doing?
Thank you for that. That was very telling. A couple more comments and then we'll move forward.
Yes, I just want to add some the point that I think we need to consider who is going to be a messenger for this financial education for new immigrants. There are 11 million undocumented immigrants here in the U.S., but in several research projects, we can see that how many immigrants usually access to the mainstream media and the government agencies and other information. So how they can access the information. So I think the financial education and financial integration is very important component for the immigration reform. But after the immigration reform, they need to wait about over 10 years to be a U.S. citizen based on the Senate bill. Right now it's over 13 years to be a U.S. citizen, and they have to pay over, I think, almost $5,000 per person. So they need some financial structure and financial support. But if they cannot access the information correctly, they easily become a victim of the scam. So the community-based organization and ethnic media and the government agency need to develop the more multi-language materials, something like that.
Thank you.
Great, so thank you very much. Moving on, one of the ways that immigrants and new Americans integrate into the community is through involvement in the military. My grandfather enlisted in the Army at the onset of World War I, less than 5 years after he had emigrated to the United States. Many service members are new Americans. Many veterans have significant challenges in the consumer marketplace. Bill, from your perspective, as an advocate for veterans and service members, what questions do you have about language access needs for those for which English may be a second language?
Hopefully this is working now. Everybody hear me? Well, we know Southern California has about 200,000 sailors and Marines floating around on a daily basis, and California is one of the 3 largest states that has a retired military population as well. And of course, this number has many more in terms of family members who live and reside right in the local area. For many of our newest sailors and Marines, certainly many of their family members are first-time Americans. And because they are fairly unsophisticated consumers, being very young, and also with the language issue, I was wondering in the community, how well does a community with such a large identifiable population that does represent a pretty significant amount of dollars that go into the economy, how well do you think the local community is in servicing that group of folks and seeing that they are in fact getting the best of the services that the community has to offer?
You all hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Olivia Calderon with the City of Los Angeles Community Development Department. I am going to get to that question, but if I could just briefly mention, I just wanted to, the first question that was asked, I don't know if a lot of folks here in the City of Los Angeles know that the City of LA is what we call a city for financial empowerment. And at the Community Development Department, we have what's called the Financial Empowerment Initiative. And this initiative is at the Community Development Department because the Community Development Department oversees $170 million, and these monies are aimed to help to do workforce development. So I'll get to the issue with veterans when it comes to making sure that we give our veterans first priority when it comes to connecting them with a job when they get back from Iraq and from Afghanistan. But we also do all the anti-poverty initiatives. And so the whole goal at the Community Development Department is how do we leverage our social delivery service system, which is through 21 family source centers that are located throughout the city of Los Angeles, in the communities with the highest concentration of poverty and in the communities with the highest population of unauthorized immigrants, communities like East Los Angeles, Koreatown, South Los Angeles, and the San Fernando Valley like Pacoima. And what we do is ensure that all families that come through our doors that are in need not only get benefit screening so that they can tap into all the services they're eligible for, but also get parenting classes, tutoring, financial education, financial coaching, and during tax time, all of our 21 sites across the city are also helping them with their tax preparation so that they tap into the earned income tax credit, for instance, and other tax services. But we recognize that at these family source centers, if we leverage our social service delivery system, we can also ensure that our immigrant communities are connected to the financial products and the financial services that are tailored to their needs. And what we know from serving our communities is that there is, and understandably so, mistrust and skepticism in our communities. Trust is a #1 issue that we hear over and over again. Many of our members of our communities have either experienced abuse, witnessed it, feel exploited, and so we want to continue to empower our caseworkers at our family source centers so that they can connect all of our Angelenos, particularly low-income folks and folks in our immigrant communities, with those products and those services, financial products and services that are tailored to the needs. You know, in 2009, the city of Los Angeles, because of our great mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, launched Bank on Los Angeles. And the whole idea behind Bank on LA was that our banks and our credit unions were going to develop basic checking accounts and savings accounts that were low cost, and second chance checking accounts for those folks that needed a second chance at banking because once they had bounced a check and were now in the check system and forever blackballed. But what we hear from communities that we connect with these with financial institutions is that times the fees, they're not sure what they have to pay for. They sometimes think that the fees are hidden and are distrustful. But we do have banking partners here in the community, like Broadway Federal Bank, that continue to offer low-cost or free basic checking accounts, second chance checking accounts, free and low-cost savings accounts, and are connecting our community through our family source centers with these products. But I'll say that in preparation for comprehensive immigration reform, we know that it's going to be very expensive, like Marisabel was mentioning, and that families need to start preparing now to save for the immigration process, for all the forms that they're going to have to process, and also whenever they go and they get their ITIN number and have to pay back taxes, that they're going to have to save for that as well. And I'll tell you, on the flip side, the financial institutions, they need to continue to partner with local leaders, with government. We are committed to accountability and transparency and have to make sure that disclosures are clear, easy to understand, easy to read, basic, and are translated so that we don't continue to hear from the community that we serve that it's just really difficult for them to understand and maneuver. And so that's what I would say on that front. On the military front, when it comes to our workforce development programs, we do give first preference, first priority to our servicemen and women that are returning back from war, and rightly so. They've sacrificed a lot, and we need to do everything in our power to make sure that they're integrated, that they find a job, and that we help them maneuver through all the various services that are available to them. I have no data on whether or not there are challenges that our men and women are facing in terms of financial products and services that are out there that are maybe not translated in the language, in various languages. But I will say this: on my way here to downtown LA, where I work, I was listening to NPR and I was listening to a story by ProPublica, and they were looking at the Military Lending Act, and the report was saying that the Military Lending Act, that it's not protecting our servicemen and women. A couple of years ago, they passed the Lending Act because payday lenders were setting up shop and targeting our military men and women. They found themselves taking out payday loans, auto loans, and then they were stuck in a debt trap because payday loans were like at 400% APR. And so they capped the loans at 36%. But the law so narrowly defined these loans, right, to just focus on payday and auto loans, that the lending community, the payday lenders, have been able to circumvent it. And I think that we need to go back and revisit that, the Military Lending Act, and make sure that we're protecting our men and women so that they are deployable, so that they don't lose their military clearance, and so that we can, continue to keep our country safe.
Great. Thank you, Olivia. Anyone else on the panel that would like to speak specifically to service member or veteran issues?
I would. I would just like to elaborate on what Olivia said about these public-private partnerships. The fact that we do not have a seamless system of taking our service people from the military into workforce and utilizing the training that they've gotten, connecting them to financial systems to provide them the kind of support they can in order to obtain living wage jobs, good jobs with benefits, I think is shameful of us as Americans in this country. My son is Air Force captain. He is connected through the Air Force to many financial options that are available. I am shocked that our lower income population in the service are enlisted, don't get the kind of attention our officers do. And he talks about that quite a bit. I do think that it's extremely important that we have strong public-private partnerships that come about, that target our veterans. As Olivia says, that we put them into workforce development, that we connect them to the kind of services they need in order to make that transition back into civilian life. And the fact that I do think that we have multi-language providers. I don't think that that's a problem. I think the problem is really targeting an effort into providing this population with the kind of services they're entitled to given their service and the priority that they're entitled to as well. And that we as Americans work much harder to ensure that these private-public partnerships exist. I also support what Olivia said about other financial institutions, not just the mainstream banks, but the community banks, the credit unions. They are there and most often have better financial products and services for community than do mainstream banks. We do have the Bank on LA program. It delivered thousands of new depositors for the mainstream banks, but perhaps the reciprocity of working and providing free checking accounts is not there. It's declined significantly because of regulations imposing limitations on fees. And I think that we have to pay attention to that, be good consumers, and to leverage other financial institutions that are out there like Federal Credit, with the credit unions, with the community banks as well.
Great. Thank you for that. That was a very insightful response on all the things that we actually do need to think about and start preparing for when in protecting our servicemen and women. I wanted to echo this idea that I keep hearing, which is about savings, right? And particularly in preparation for immigration reform, that I know is going to happen, right? It's going to happen. As of yesterday, the Senate committee actually, they're actually doing their work, which is good. So anyway, I'm crossing my fingers still. But anyway, let's move on. So it's going to happen. I think people need to prepare, right? I mean, I think that's something that is very clear for us all, that saving to pay for those fees, those fines, the taxes is going to be something that's going to be paramount, because for low-income individuals, those fees can actually become the ultimate barrier for legalization. So I want to bring in, somebody has done a lot of work around savings in general. Betsy at the ARP, I know, where are you, Betsy? There you
I'm
are.
right here.
I know you've been, thinking about savings, for a different community, but I think the challenges of promoting savings, promoting good behavior, on savings, it's a challenge across the board. So I wanted to bring you into this conversation to see, what from your perspective, something that we should be considering.
I'd be happy to do that. I want to say, first of all, it's not necessarily a different community, because our members, it's just age, and we're very happy to have everybody who's over 50, new immigrants, all immigrant
Stand
groups.
corrected is the same thing.
So we try, what we do for all, and I think that that's part of it. We do look at, building financial security for a lifetime, which means looking at retirement. But we're also, I think, concerned. For instance, we look at some of the banks and others have basically bank payday loans that are coming out of people's Social Security checks, and there are much higher usage for people with Social Security checks than for the average banking population. So one of my concerns is, for what purposes do people who are looking even at the short term, say 6 months, need to save or borrow? I mean, from your experience, what primarily do they need that money for? Hopefully they can save it. If they can't, what do they need to borrow for in the new immigrant community?
I wanted to ask Aki to just to step into this to this question and talk from your perspective from the Filipino Worker Center. What are you doing to help them save?
Sure. Well, Filipino Worker Center, we're here in historic Filipino town, and Filipinos are the largest Asian population in Los Angeles and one of the largest immigrant populations in the United States. And so things that we see that people are most needing to save for is, well, one is for tuition for their children, for example, and sometimes for their children who are still in the Philippines. So they have to save up for the tuition. They also have to save up for the fees for remitting that money. While many times they're, living in we have some members who, there are 10 of them in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, so they have a small rental for a bed space. We also, now a lot of people are also saving up for immigration reform, of course, so that they can afford to adjust their status. And we work in collaboration with Mission Asset Funds to leverage the assets that we have in our community to do social loans, and also to begin to establish their own credit histories here, so that when they're able to adjust their status, they can also have an established credit history and start having a more stable financial existence. And especially a lot of our population are domestic workers, who are live-in domestic workers or caregivers, who are in very isolated situations, working 24 hours around the clock. And a lot of the times their connection to the world is their cell phone. So mobile access is also a big issue for Filipino low-wage workers. That's how they're able to connect their Facebook to people that they know, or get information, do banking as well, so that's one issue. And then we also we have a new affordable housing development that's opening up in October. It's be finished construction with 45 units of affordable housing, and there are other projects that are happening like that this year and next year in the Asian community. And so one of the issues is also safety deposits for people to be able to move in. And half of the units are voucher-based with Section 8. So a lot of them are homeless, moving into their first-time apartment, to a stable place. So a lot of times they don't have that security deposit saved up as well. So we're also working with Mission Assets and then New Economics for Women to also think and use the social loans, so that they can also save up and be able to afford a deposit, so that they can move into a stable living environment for them and their families. And one more thing about immigration is, for families that have multiple children, the fees get so much bigger, because you're not processing just for yourself or one individual, but when you have children, that you're also trying to process, it becomes very difficult then to afford those fees.
Great, thank you for that. I wanted to see if we can bring in Daniel as well into this conversation. I know you do a lot of work in East LA, and want to where are you, Daniel? I can't see you. There you are. Yeah, I just want to see if you can add some of your perspectives on how you're helping folks, through the savings process.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Daniel. I'm with the East LA Community Corporation. We're a HUD certified housing counseling agency. We provide pre-purchase education and counseling, foreclosure prevention assistance, and also a wealth building program that encompasses financial counseling, education, free tax preparation, and also matched savings accounts. Some of the patterns that we've seen with the clients that we've served, the short-term savings needs include from emergency savings that many participants currently don't have, but we also have seen, especially within the past few years, as the economic downturn has really impacted many of our community members, and many folks have relied on credit card debt to be able to sustain their monthly obligations, be able to meet some of their basic necessities as well. So those are some of the current needs that we've seen. Through our free tax preparation program, we have experienced folks coming in anticipation of immigration reform, seeking to apply for their ITIN, seeking to find not only this year's taxes, but also past year taxes as well, to be able to create that, the documentation, the proof that they need to prove the residency, and pay any back taxes that are going to be required of any possible immigration reform that comes through. The need to borrow, for the most part, has been based on a need for their necessities. Where we have seen some borrowing on some consumer products, the most common ones we've seen are either department stores, and many times we speak with our clients, they're not aware of the high costs that come with any JCPenney, any Macy's, any clothing that they're purchasing for their family. So making sure that the financial education that we provide, that they fully understand the disclosures that are being provided to them, and also making sure that they're asking that those disclosures be provided in their own language. Many times they're receiving their bills and information regarding their financial transactions in English, where either they're having to speak to their children who are in middle school or going into high school, helping them translate and communicate what exactly is going on with these financial purchases. So those are some of the patterns that we've seen within the documented population, but we've also experienced just in the overall population that we serve within our community.
Great. So thank you, Daniel. Judge Rizzo, you are one of just a small number of judges across the country who's actually developed foreclosure diversion programs, which really provide opportunities for homeowners to sit with their lenders and try to work out a solution short of foreclosure, resulting in the consumer staying in the home, a win-win scenario in many cases. I understand financial education is a major component of that program. Do you have a question for the panel you'd like to ask?
Yes, I do, and good afternoon, everyone. And I hate having my back to this wonderful group. How are you? At any rate, it's great to hear from the panelists on so many issues. And so we have this umbrella of financial literacy, which I never knew the term until very recently in my world, education. And I know that there is even a comment saying, well, we know where that's going. Studies have gone to show the effectiveness or not. It's on a continuum. So the question to ask is, when you do develop one, and for an example, one with our program is court annex. So you have to go through our program. It's a judicial foreclosure state. You get introduced to financial literacy training. We carry you through, and then we do coaching. We call them budget buddies. So the question is a model like that or others that you have tested and seen in terms of effectiveness, where we are dealing with new immigration populations with a variety of languages, do you see some forms where there would be more access of programs such as this to take them from through crisis and then beyond? That's what it's all about, the sustainability of them looking at their financial world a different way. I was wondering if some of our panelists could comment on the effectiveness of this, drilling down to the various new immigration communities. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think that financial literacy in their language is exceptionally effective. Let me tell you a story. At the height of the foreclosure crisis, we decided as an organization and as partners with New Economics for Women that we needed to partner to do financial literacy, but it was contextualized education as it related to foreclosures. People were taught about their documents. They were taught how to read their documents. They were taught what their documents said, that how often their interest rates reset, and we carried them through that information. We also worked with them to see, based on their financial status, what they could have qualified for, and many would have qualified for state programs, special programs that would have provided them much better loans. The best thing about this was when we partnered with the lenders to then do modification negotiation in our office, to see a monolingual Spanish-speaking woman or a Chinese woman wagging their finger at a lender saying, She knew what had happened to her, that she'd been given a subprime mortgage loan when she qualified for one from the California Housing Finance Agency, lower interest rate, and that would have been fixed. I sit back and I said, this is why I do what I do. That it's effective. We have many of those homeowners then formed as volunteers and went out in the community to bring in other homeowners at risk of losing their homes. And they stood in front of those people and said, you know, months ago I was sitting where you were sitting, a victim. I was afraid losing my home. I've learned how to read my documents. I've learned what programs there are, and I've learned what I could do to get a modification. And I will never be a victim again, and I'll stand with you, and our community will never again be taken advantage of. That is powerful. And that was all done because we brought in this contextualized education on loans in the language of the individuals. It was effective, they learned it, and I'm very certain that they will be smarter consumers and won't be taken advantage of again or be victims again the way this foreclosure crisis took these people.
Great. Thanks, Yvonne. Amy?
This is KRC.
Yep, I'm sorry. Can we go Amy and then we'll go down? Okay.
So I think what you're asking is whether financial counseling programs and materials would be effective if they're delivered in language, and the answer is definitely yes, if they're culturally appropriate and delivered through relevant channels. I was really encouraged actually to hear Mr. Jackson's presentation describing the design process for the CPF Bien Español. And the reason why is because a lot of organizations, government agencies, corporations think if I just translate the materials, that's enough. And that is so far from the truth. Translation does not equal cultural competency. And they're totally different things. Just because somebody can speak a language does not mean that the concept makes sense to them. I was talking to a group of Cambodian seniors and describing with a translator, you know, the concept of a downward spiral, right? When something goes wrong and then something leads to another bad thing and it keeps going, right? And they said, oh, that must be like our analogy about a monkey falling out of a tree. And I thought, maybe, I'm not sure. But my downward spiral example of, you know, when an airplane loses altitude had not connected for them until my interpreter, you know, described what it meant. So we realized that when we develop materials, it's not just about a straight translation. It's really critical to take the context and the audience and what kind of background they may have into account. I work at the Little Tokyo Service Center. I'm the Director of Senior Services. So I oversee a multilingual staff of 10 social workers who primarily work with older adults and their family members. But in a nonprofit setting, we kind of do a little bit of everything. So we've realized that when we're talking to Japanese seniors or Japanese families, where in Japan they have similar financial institutions as they do here in the US, some of the concepts make sense. They can grasp it pretty quickly. They just have to know what the name of it is in English in order to access it. But when you're talking to a South Asian refugee who is from a more agrarian background, these concepts of lending or interest and, you know, term loans, it's very difficult to communicate. It's an interpretation process, it's an education process. And not everybody can do it. You know, just having the translation or hiring one Vietnamese speaker for your staff or one Japanese speaker for your staff is not enough because they don't have the network within an ethnic community in order to get out there and do the education. So I think the issue that Hiju raised earlier about, you know, the channels of delivering that information is really critical. And even things, I think a lot of government agencies try very hard to set up a service delivery model. And I have to say with the Family Source Centers that they aren't very relevant for the Asian community in Los Angeles, where we're about 15% of the LA area and less than 10% of the populations of the FSCs are API. Actually, I've heard it's a very small percentage, maybe even less than 5%. But, and part of that is because those agencies are not connected to the community. So even in low-income communities, Asian and Pacific Islander communities such as the Tongans or the Cambodians, where they have higher rates of poverty than Latino and African American communities, they can't go to the FSC. There's nobody who speaks their language. They go to the Tongan Community Center, or they go to United Cambodian Community in Long Beach, or something like that. So these community-based organizations, and I work at a community-based organization, so I'm completely biased, and I confess that to you now. But these community-based organizations have spent decades building up networks in the communities that they serve. And it's not something that happens overnight. And a website is really great. It's a great step, and if there's somewhere, I hope that you'll be doing many more languages, Asian languages, and that you'll use a similar process in order to develop those websites. And that would be a great tool for us as community-based organizations to utilize. But a lot of the people are not online, don't have access. There's still a need for on-the-ground information delivery and the use of whatever social networks exist within a particular ethnic community, whether it be, not to stereotype, but churches in the Korean American community or temples in the Cambodian community, or those kinds of things where it takes a certain level of knowledge of the community in order to be able to convey that information. I think the other thing with the other thing that I'd like to communicate to our own ethnic communities is where the scams come from. Because I think this is true of anybody. We tend to be more suspicious of the other, people who don't look like us, right? And that's sort of a natural human instinct. But the reality is that most of the scams and things come from people who look or speak as we do, because that's who you can communicate with, that's who you learn to trust. And when we go out and educate groups of Asian seniors, we talk about this issue, about our own sometimes ethnic or racial fears. And I have seniors who will say, well, when I get a phone call, solicitation in English, I just say, I don't speak English, and I hang up on them. And then they say, but when somebody calls me in Japanese, I listen, because hardly anybody speaks my language. And there are some scammers or corporations who have figured out how to be culturally competent and take advantage of it. And so we really have to educate our communities about that. And I think that's something that I'd really like to make sure we convey to the many different ethnic communities, since this is such a diverse population.
Could I just comment? I appreciate Amy saying that we have to do a better job at the Community Development Department in ensuring that our family source centers are meeting the needs of our Asian. Yeah, we have. Well, but I will say this though. What it speaks to is that what we recognize is that we need to partner. The city of Los Angeles can't do it all. And there are some great partners in our communities. When it comes to financial education, we recognize that financial coaching, one-on-one financial coaching is powerful. And so we partnered with the Center on Asset Building Opportunities to create a cadre of financial coaches. And so we went through a pilot where 10 nonprofits were chosen, 5 of our family source centers. Our caseworkers went through a 6 months training, and our vision is that we are going to have certified financial coaches at all of our 21 family source centers, but we'd like to see them in all nonprofits so that they could provide this one-on-one coaching with clients, and talk about the power of asset building, the need to save, how to create a budget, how to deal with debt, how to deal with credit, and so forth. We, again, because we recognize that our resources are limited and our budget continues to be hit hard, also reached out to the library department. This is the second year where we launched a financial fitness day and provided free financial counseling, financial advice, helped give folks access to a copy of their free credit report, had someone there to walk them through it so they could understand it, also do benefit screening and free tax preparation. But what I'd love to see, and we're having conversations to make this possible, is to expand that partnership. Our library, 73 branches throughout our city, serve 10 million Angelinos every single year, and they have now a citizenship corner, right? Where folks can get access to all of the guides and materials, study materials for them to apply for citizenship, to understand the naturalization process, how much it's gonna cost. They're providing English classes for free. Because of our partnership with the Financial Fitness Fair, all of our libraries now have agreed that they're going to offer free financial education seminars at all of our 73 library branches for free. And we need to figure out how we marry the two. And so I think that when it comes to ensuring that we're meeting the needs of all of our communities, because it's so diverse and beautiful here in Los Angeles, that we think about partnerships.
Great. So thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to go to Hee-Ju, and then we're going to move on to the next question.
Yes. Language access is not just about the translation, because let me share my experience. KRC is providing the social service for the Medicaid program, so we serve for our seniors to help understand their Medicaid benefit, but they never received the Korean letter from the government agency, the Medicaid agency. So we organized the Korean American seniors and meet the supervisors and the government agency and told them how important for the language access. So finally they received the Korean letter from the Medicaid benefit, but still they don't understand what they are talking about, this letter is about, because they don't understand about the system. So language access is not just mean that we have a Spanish form, Korean form, and other things, but the important thing is that they can understand the system. It's very important. Another example is about the deferred action recipient. Last year, the Obama administration announced the deferred action that allowed the undocumented young student to stay here without the deportation fears. So they received the work permit and driver's license right now. So they want to open a bank account and they want to start the credit life. But many of them came to this country when they were young. So if some people, they can speak Korean, but still they came to our agency to ask about what is the credit, how can I open the bank account, and what is the credit report, and something like this. So we should think about what is the language, actual language access. It's not just about the translation.
Great, thank you. So, Dory, Woodstock, the Woodstock Institute frequently advocated concerns about higher cost alternative products. Are there implications for new Americans that you would like the panel to explore? Besides a microphone.
We know that a lot of new Americans and immigrants work at jobs where you don't always have direct deposit of your paychecks, and some of those workers are using prepaid cards where you can load checks or cash onto them, but there are fees charged for that feature, and I wondered if you have concerns about the fees for those services. Thank you.
Sure. I can jump in there. So I think, one thing that the prepaid cards are doing are some good things, right? Where people don't have to walk around with cash and be victims of robberies and such, because they know that they don't have access to bank accounts and things like that. Another good thing, they can use them for bill pay online, buying, airline tickets and things like that. So there are some benefits. What I would say are the major issues with them are the transaction fees. And so there's some decent prepaid cards, and there's some very bad prepaid cards, and that's where it's hard to figure out, what type of regulation regulates all of them, or are they all FDIC insured? We've got a lot of people targeting the Latino community, the African American community, with folks like famous people targeting these prepaid cards, the Kardashians, all of those exciting cards. So we have to be careful with the high cost transaction fees. In addition, you can't build credit history with these. The other part is it doesn't tie you back into the banking system, right? Where you can access a secured card, a credit card, a bank account, you know, loans and things like that. So I think it just doesn't really help integrate. But when I was previously at National Council of La Raza, we did a survey on prepaid cards, and a lot of the concerns were around all the transaction, the little fees every time you use it, every time it loads, every time, you know, you basically turn around, you're getting hit with another fee. So more regulations around that would be helpful.
If I could jump in here.
Yeah, please.
Again, at the UCLA North American Integration and Development Center, a number of years ago, we began to look at how to use these technologies to provide financial services and products to low-income and poor folks, both domestically and internationally. And we've run alongside the development of the technology as well. Originally, we were hauling satellite dishes down and installing them on adobe houses in Oaxaca and elsewhere, and contracting with companies for last mile technology, all those kinds of things to try to use these with the idea that technology will and is beginning to lower the cost for these kinds of transactions if done properly, and maybe for the right reasons, I would like to suggest. But anyway, what we also incubated some years ago now that has been implemented, all of our research is applied research. We, both Dr. Hinojosa and I, are the intellectual architects of the first hybrid municipal ID prepaid debit card. And that has taken some years to develop, and it has been just recently implemented in the great city of Oakland. Oakland is about the only city in the country that had the guts to take on this new initiative, and we spent 3 years working with the city of Oakland, doing due diligence and everything else that comes along with this kind of innovation. And again, in terms of the prepaid, this is a prepaid debit card, and it's a MasterCard, so it's called the Oakland City ID Prepaid MasterCard. And the doors were opened by the third-party vendor, SF Global, that is in a private-public partnership, to provide that kind of services. And again, this was a city, like many of our cities, who's looking at how do we provide low-cost financial services to folks who the banks are not soliciting and who they do not want, to folks who have issues around documentation that doesn't allow them to get a credit union account, etc. So that was their first target population. They also came to understand through our education work that this is much broader than just servicing immigrant folks, that this is also a product for the African American community there, the African American community being the most unbanked population in the country, white folks who are the second most unbanked population in the country, etc. And so we've implemented it there. Is it good for immigrants? Pricing is everything. And so when you take on an initiative like this, you're taking on the financial institutions and you're going to battle, the good battle, about the pricing and trying to use every persuasion and also a real understanding that you bring to that battle, and that is that companies, financial service providers, banks, etc., can still make money and still service our communities because of volume. Volume will be able to, is another major ingredient as to why the fees can be brought down. And so the model that we have implemented is that this is going to be volume driven. The more people that enroll in the optional financial services, they are optional, they are not required to have this Oakland City ID card, then it will bring down the prices. So the individuals working alongside the faith-based organizations, working alongside the NGOs who are engaged in financial empowerment activities, working along the municipal government agencies who are also involved in these kinds of services, and the mayor's office. What we understand is that the more people that enroll in this, it will drive down the prices. This is a daily discussion that we are having with both the bank, the Community Development Bank that is behind this municipal ID card. It is a bank that just was honored as being one of 12 the best B corporations. That is a bottom line corporation, and that they're attentive to these kinds of issues. And but it's a daily discussion with all the different kinds of financial providers that is engaged in providing these kinds of services. So again, I would say that, you know, we put the question to the folks themselves. Is this good for immigrant folks, okay? Is this good for low-income poor people? The doors were open in Oakland on February the 19th. There's over 4,000 people that have applied already.
That's great.
And so I think that's one indication of the need, et cetera. And I would also say that, well, there's much more to say.
Okay, I know there's so much more to say. And I think in the past hour, we've learned so much. We've learned so much. We tackled the issue of, you know, what are the issues that are concerning new Americans, immigrants in the financial marketplace. And I think we've all shared our learnings, definitely seen that is, language access is really important, but it's really just a starting point, right? And also kind of finding out that we're actually providing relevant, culturally relevant, responsible financial products and services that match the needs, you know, of this particular community. I think that's something that's clear. But another question that goes beyond that too is about debt and debt collections, right? So Maiva, I want to bring you into this point. I know we have a couple more minutes to the end of this session, but I think this is a really critical segment of the sort of financial marketplace, right? It's about access, products, but then what happens when debt and debt collectors? So,
great. Yes. Okay. Well, I can project. Here we have one. Here, it worked. Thank you. Great. So we deal with debt collection at our office in a couple different fronts, foreclosure prevention front, but also other forms of debt collection. We've been doing more and more of that work. So what I'd love to hear from folks is, are you experiencing particular types of collections tactics aimed at immigrant communities? Are there any tactics you find particularly abusive or offensive in some fashion? And how are people defending themselves? Who do you send people to when they are experiencing the abuse? Thank you.
Yvonne, do you want to jump in here?
Maybe I should give the background. We're Legal Services. We're a private nonprofit law firm. We provide free legal services. Debt collection is one. And it's on the rise. I do think that debt collectors have become very clever. It's rampant with abuses. I think we do have federal and state legislation that restricts what debt collectors can do. But again, it goes to what does the community know about that. I think that the calls continue, threatening calls. The mailings are typically not sent in the language of the debtor. It's in English, and they appear very formal. They look like they come from a government agency. Threatening people, letting them know that they owe a debt, they're to contact them immediately. People will access services throughout the community. Many of us are represented here. What we find is that a great deal of the abuses are post-judgment. So what happens is, for an immigrant community, once they're sued, and typically the lawsuits we see are credit card. They arise from credit card debt and unsecured debt arising from a foreclosure. There have been some suits on that. But people get served with these documents and have no idea what they are. They default, which means they don't answer. And so the debt collector gets an automatic judgment. And so the abuses come in post-judgment collection, where people are called, they're sent documents that look official, they're sent a payment plan that people are then intimidated into signing and providing very high monthly payments. But what we find overwhelmingly is many of these people are on fixed incomes such as Social Security, SSI, state and federal public benefits. All of that income is exempt from any collection. And unless people know that, they go ahead and enter into these high payment plans that then put them at risk of not paying rent, not paying for medication, or what have you. So we are seeing that on an increase. Who is there to defend them? Very few. There are very few advocates for the number of people in need. There's a lot of self-help clinics out there that will assist them. We have debt collection workshops at the courthouses that we run, but the fact is that the demand is bigger than what we could provide for. So there has to be a real look at how legislation can be reinforced, how third-party debt collectors, again, is a huge problem, how to restrict them. Perhaps the idea that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau could do some regulation that provides an affirmative obligation for debt collectors to inquire the source of the income and then have to back off if that's exempt income, and to say so. So I do think there's a lot of work to do in that area for our communities at large, not just our immigrant communities.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I think our to-do list is just increasing by the minute here. But before closing, I definitely want to bring in Miriam Mesa from CHIRLA to sort of weigh in on her perspective on, overall, CHIRLA does a lot of work on not necessarily just debt collection, but just overall, CHIRLA does a lot of work in organizing immigrants in a lot of different ways. And so wanted to ask Miriam or give her the last word before we sort of close off on this section.
Sure. Okay. My name is Miriam Mesa. I'm with CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles. And thank you first of all for inviting us here. We are a community-based organization also, and we've been serving the community since year 1986. Therefore, we've gained the trust of the community. We run a hotline at the organization that we answer at least 15,000 calls a year, members from the community just asking questions in a wide variety of issues. And one of them is, for example, they've been victim of fraud from different financial institutions. They've been victim of fraud from attorneys. They've been abused or exploited. So what we could see within the immigrant community is that they've been used and abused, and it's very hard for them to trust. And we all need to step up and gain the immigrant community's trust. First of all, what we were thinking is with the immigration reform, this is going to entail high fees for these families that sometimes it's not only one member, it could be 2, 3, 4 members of the family. We're talking maybe 10, 12, $15,000. This is a very high fee for a family, and we suggest and try to exhort the different financial institutions to create programs and become partners with different community organizations and places that could be trusted, and establish different programs with very low interest for these families that are going to need this funding that they won't have available right now. Okay, so we could offer these by experience. When we started processing deferred action cases, which is the recently passed legislation that helps students obtain an employment authorization card, we became partnered with a specific fondo that they provided these loans to these students that are applying, and it was a very, very, very low interest, and they would just pay back little by little, and then these students were able to apply, and otherwise they could have not applied for their employment authorization that they were entitled to. So it's really important to exhort the financial institutions to develop some type of program and become partners of community-based organizations. They are your friends, and we are friends in the community. We'll need to work together in order to make this happen and help this community that is in need and very limited in resources. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that we're definitely running out of time here, but I wanted to thank the panelists for joining in this conversation. I really appreciate, and also the CAB members. Thank you for thinking about the questions, and I know we had many more questions, and we can engage you all in discussion, to the evening. but we can do that. So I want to turn it over to Sixta Martinez, who's going to engage us in an open conversation with the public.
Thank you, Jose and Steve, for leading such an interesting and varied conversation, but we're not quite done yet. Now it's time to hear from the audience participants here today. The open mic portion of the field hearing is an opportunity for the CFPB to hear from you, to hear your perspective about today's discussion, or to hear your views about what consumer finance trends and practices are affecting your community. Each person will have 1 minute for comment, and what we hear from you is very valuable to the CFPB. So we want to hear from as many of you as possible and from all of you that signed up to provide your observations. So I strongly encourage you to stick to the 1 minute limit so that everyone who did sign up has the opportunity to share their observations. So our first audience participant is Yvonne Boyd, and Chris will bring you a microphone. Will you raise your hand, Yvonne Boyd?
Thank you. I'm the pastor of Altadena United Methodist Church, and some of my members were victimized by the payday lenders and also by the mortgage crises, and they are still having a hard time rebounding. Some lost their homes. And so this information has been excellent for me to take back to them and share with them. And I just want to express my appreciation for that. Many questions are now raised. The concern that they may have been victimized by payday lenders taking income from Social Security. It's hard to hear that is possible. But on the other hand, it's good to hear that you all are addressing it.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd.
And so I want to thank you.
John Arriaga. Oscar Rodriguez.
Buenos dias, yo me llamo Oscar Rodriguez. I'm the CEO of Loanmark, a California licensed consumer lender. Listening to everybody's story, to me it seems like a secondary problem, a very important problem. The biggest problem that I see is the lack of credit. Because of the lack of credit out there, the demand for credit far exceeds credit available. I have a short story that I'd like to share with you. When I was 30 years old, I bought $1 million life insurance policy before my son was born. That policy cost me $44. Today I'm 41, that same policy cost me $89 a month. When I'm 80, and I hope to be 80 someday, that same policy will be $15,000 a month. Why the increase? There's two things: risk-based pricing. The premium of the policy must be greater than the risk. Number two, cost-based pricing. Price must be greater than the cost of the service. How life insurance or any insurance policy is priced is perfectly acceptable. The price of insurance premiums, no matter how high, is perfectly acceptable. How credit risk is determined and how credit rates are determined also is perfectly acceptable. Credit is a civil right. As a son of immigrants, I have experienced both sides of credit, not having it and having it. You don't just get credit, you have to earn it. Somebody has to take the risk of offering you credit. Only with credit can you become an active member of society. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Edward Aguilar. Go ahead, Mr. Arriaga.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking your time to come visit us in Los Angeles, California. My name is John Arriaga. I'm the Executive Director for the League of California Cities Latino Caucus. The Latino Caucus is about 450 mayors and city council members statewide and growing. This issue is one that has come up with this organization for a good number of years, and we have developed a partnership with the Payday Loan Association and the group. There are differences amongst the members, not to say that we have 100% that support it, but I think most of our members agree that there is a place and need for payday loan companies in the state. And they do serve a constituency that needs that service from time to time. I have a letter that I'd like to read into the record from our president, Diane Martinez of the League of California Cities Latino Caucus. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today.
Mr. Arriaga, would you please submit the statement for the record? We'd be glad to include it.
Okay, I will, but just briefly, I will say that we'd much rather have the payday loan or businesses here in California, those that are regulated, those that are scrutinized, those that do serve a purpose in the community. There are those that are a problem area, and if you eliminate the payday loan organizations that are regulated, they're going to turn to those, particularly the internet services, where people do get into trouble. Again, this does serve a purpose for those individuals who, from time to time in their life, run into a situation where they need $100, $200 or so, just to get through the day, to get through an immediate problem with utilities, fixing their car, just taking care of their daily needs, and it does come in handy. So we'd appreciate it if you give this a serious look and can appreciate the need for this in our communities.
Thank you, Mr. Arriaga. We will take your statement for the record. Michael Escamillo.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Escamillo. I'm representing Check Into Cash. And just wanted to represent Check Into Cash, of course, as well as our customer base. And generally our customers, you know, they come to our office and they just need, you know, like a few bucks to pay their groceries and to pay the utilities before, you know, they get cut off. So they will, at the end when they pay off their loan, they just pretty much say like, thank you very much, you saved my life. I mean, it sounds like an exaggeration, of course, but just generally from their heart, they mean that it really helped them out in that time, and so you know, I may never see them again, but you know, just that the point that we helped them out, and we have that option in the community, is a wonderful thing, and we shouldn't have that taken away at all.
Thank you, Mr. Escamillo. I'd like to remind everyone of our 1-minute limit. We have a number of folks who signed up to testify, and we really want to get to everyone. Myra Ponce. Jorge Corralejo.
Good afternoon, Director Cordray. Welcome back to Los Angeles, you and your staff, and thank you for your very hard work in setting the financial system straight. It's a long, arduous task, and I'm pleased to say I've worked with your staff over the last couple of years. And I wanted to mention that looking at the audience here, there are a good number of advocates, and I think that you know, you are faced with a lot of obstruction in Washington, particularly from Congress, and I think that the success of the CFPB depends on advocates that are here as an example. But I think that the thing that helps us the greatest is the collection of data and the release of data, because you know, well, many of us have been advocates for decades, and I think that is a critical issue, the collection of data and the release of data. Very familiar with many of the issues, and I think that is a critical component to what we're doing today. And wanted to, if there's time for to address a question, see how you're working around moving this important agenda forward in light of the obstruction. And I think it's importantly to note, last of all, the importance that the CFPB stands in the economic recovery its financial openness and fairness, but the contributions overall are incredible to the economic recovery and ongoing operations of our economy.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Corralejo. Don Gwaltney.
Good afternoon. I'd also like to thank the board for the opportunity to have this forum today, and there's been a lot of great information shared. My name is Dan Gwaltney. I represent a small neighborhood financial service centers located in Southern California. Our businesses are located in areas that are available to all people, mainly in areas that are just high traffic. We do multiple things such as wire transfers, check cashing, small consumer loans. And we know that customers come in and they're looking for avenues to fulfill their financial needs. They know that they have alternatives, and they're looking at traditional alternatives, and they're looking at ours. And a lot of our consumers, they make the financial choice recognizing the various options that they have. And we would like to make sure that the CFPB keeps that in mind as they go move forward and look at the options that need to be in the marketplace. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gwaltney. Jerry Guzman.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to the director, your staff at CFPB, the advisory committee, and of course the community agencies that are here. I represent many groups, but today I would like to speak on behalf of the 29,000 K through 12 students and their families that I represent as a local school board member, in addition to 30,000 adult education people I represent. The way the current system is set up, many of my families on occasion have turned to non-bank financial products out of necessity and because of lack of other options. The devastation a child, a student, forget for the moment the adults in the family suffer when utilities are turned off or they're displaced or they don't have proper nutrition is great. 73%, I'm from Southeast San Gabriel Valley, of those families qualify for free and reduced lunch. I ask you, especially now with the immigration reform opening up, many of our families have multiple members, as mentioned very knowledgeably by Chila. They're depending on non-bank financial products to pay the fee so that they can take advantage of the current immigration reform before this administration changes and God forbid something go back. We go back 10 steps. So I beg you to please consider and think of those residents and those citizens who on occasion just do not have access to any other option, and choose and use it wisely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Guzman. Candace Carmona.
Hi, good afternoon. I get a little nervous speaking, so I wrote my comment on a piece of paper. Okay, good afternoon. I represent a typical American family, what politicians call mainstream. Both husband and I came to our family with a daughter, and now expecting our first together. Throughout our marriage, we have chosen, on occasion, to use a non-bank product, such as payday and installments loan. We are hoping that option is always available when we need it. We both work and feel we are able to handle our financial decisions. We don't need government limiting or dictating our choices. Thank you so much for what you do and for bringing this meeting to Los Angeles, and of course for launching the new Spanish consumer finance website.
Thank you, Ms. Carmona. Mimi Añadono.
Well, good afternoon. I'd like to say, first of all, I was a customer and now an employee of Checking to Cash. A while back, my husband had an enlarged heart, and he was within minutes of dying. We were very strapped for money, and I went down to Checking to Cash and got my very first loan. And because of that, my husband's still here today. And because of the service that I received from them, I went down and I applied for the job, and now I work for them. And now I am a sole provider of my family, and I've been able to provide my family very well. So just wanted to share that with you.
Thank you, Ms. Añadono. Paul Leonard. Maria Jimenez, Thu Alvarado,
Good afternoon, and thank you everybody for coming to Los Angeles. I'm a banker that works with the check cashing and payday loan industry. And over the years, it's come to my attention an observation. If a customer walks into any one of the 4 banks I've worked for that's been friendly to the short-term small dollar lending industry, they walk into any of those branches and ask for a $200 loan. They can't get it, and not in any of the banks I've worked at. So I think that the entrepreneurial spirit that's represented in this room and outside there on the street by these businessmen and women who are fulfilling that need that the banks I've worked at least to date, are not providing, is something that should certainly be encouraged. It's efficiency of the market. There's a demand for the product. These types of business entities, I think, are ubiquitous now, and it seems to me that folks are voting with their feet and going out to support this business. So anyways, that's just an observation from a banker from where I sit on the other side of the desk.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarado. Telesforo Palacios.
Good afternoon. Hi, my name is Telesforo Palacios, and I'm simply just a waiter at a Chinese restaurant. I am a customer, checking to cash. My income is very important in my family. So if I have say my phone to pay, the rent to get paid, sometimes checking to cash is an option for me. It's very important. Me and my mom use it, not a lot, but we use it when we need it. So I think it's a great option to have, and I want my option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palacios. Gustavo Maratha. Jesse Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to one point about the law of unintended consequences that we're all familiar with. Prohibition has been tried in this country before, and we know how that turned out. Unfortunately, created an opportunity for illegal activity to take care of the demand that continued to exist. So I just wanted to mention to the CAB and the Bureau that these millions of transactions in the small loan community or the small loan market, you can't turn a switch and turn that demand off overnight. I'd like to pose an alternate solution, which is actually to create more competitors in the marketplace, more competition to drive that pricing down. These interim steps to legislate and create small changes and small regulations here and there, state to state, create this elevated barrier to entry from would-be competitors who look at it and say, I don't know if I want to get in that market, it might be gone tomorrow, it might be gone in a year. An investor that's looking for a solid return over time and is going to operate fairly in a marketplace has to know that his investment will be able to be paid over the next decade. So why not create a stable marketplace with fair rules and say, hey, we're open for business. Credit unions, banks, investors, come participate, drive the price down. Are these regulations actually limiting the competition and keeping the prices high? Something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Terry Pace. Barbara Welsh. Thank you, Ms. Pace.
Thank you. My name is Terry Pace, and I'm speaking on behalf of Cash America Payday Advance and the payday industry. And whenever we get together to meet to talk about financial products, the payday product always comes up. To me, the real reason we are gathered here today is about choices, to allow them or to eliminate them. We are a diverse society. We should be proud of our diverseness. Because we are diverse, we need diverse options. We are not a one-size-fits-all society. Payday loans is a choice. It is diverse. We see people from many walks of life and cultures, from many pay ranges, from hundreds of dollars to thousands. We see people that work in our schools and in our medical facilities, to those that work in our restaurants. We see young and old. We are a diverse option. I am sorry that this hearing is being held during the day in the middle of the week when our customers are working and unable to attend and speak for themselves. In choosing, I would like to share one more thought. If there's one thing I've learned during my 10 years in the industry, is that one can legislate out the product, but you cannot legislate out the need. You don't need it, don't use it. Don't take away the option for those that find it viable. We are a diverse society and need diverse options. Let people choose for themselves what works for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pace. Barbara Welsh.
Thank you for allowing me time to address the panel. My name is Barbara Welsh, a Hawaii State licensed mortgage loan originator and mortgage broker. I'm concerned about the disparate impact on the mortgage broker with the rules that have been written and are still to be written. I've originated mortgage loans for over 23 years in my community and a sole proprietor for 8.5, after employment as a federal examiner and financial analyst, where I concentrated on compliance with Community Reinvestment Act. I'm also an educator at the Hawaii Homeownership Center. The third-party originator, labeled as a non-creditor by the Federal Reserve, contributes to the confusion to the consumer and the differences in disclosures on loan costs. While the TPO discloses their origination fee, which has been set in stone since 2010 and is in most cases offset by the lender credit, the other lending channels are free of this restriction. We remain concerned about the specifics of the 3% cap on points and fees. Without clear guidance, the mortgage broker may find they are no longer remain in business. We need to recognize that the mortgage loan originator company the same rules should not apply. The third-party originator is generally a locally owned business who meets the lending needs of their geographic community by offering the consumer choices, usually delivered at a lower cost. Please be aware of the disparate impact of the rules on this lending channel. Failure to do so will restrict consumer loan choices and affect the local communities in which we operate. I met with my legislators just one second in March, and I asked each of them, do they understand how mortgage loans are originated in the United States? And all across the board, they had no idea of the channels of loan origination. Please do not give a disparate impact on our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Welsh. Don Martinez. Andrew Chang.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrew Chang, and I'm with the Center for Asset Building Opportunity. We are the local lead asset building organization here in Los Angeles, partnering organization to Los Angeles City Community Development in piloting the Financial Coaching Network, and part of the Assets and Opportunity Network. And in light of immigration reform and the growing concern of predatory lending practices targeting immigrant communities and communities of color using small dollar short-term loans, I would like to suggest 3 policy recommendations and urge the CFPB to use their authority to protect consumers from unfair and deceptive practices. The first would be to establish an ability to repay rule for short-term small dollar loan, or for the short-term small dollar loan market. Currently, there is they are not subject to any federal underwriting standards. The second recommendation is that the Bureau set a minimum 90-day term required standard for all short-term small dollar lenders. Studies show that 90 days is the minimum time needed to repay these small dollar loans, and the current 14-day industry standard really isn't realistic for most borrowers to repay the money borrowed. The third recommendation is that the Bureau should prohibit mandatory check holding and automatic bank withdrawals, particularly for deposit advance loans from the banks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. Andrew Barrera.
Yes, I sit on the board of directors for the Los Angeles Metropolitan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce.
But more importantly, I've had the opportunity to work as a business assistant center manager with a contract with the city, micro enterprise programs, and the small business development center programs throughout the country. And one of the main problems that I've seen is called with microfinancing. We're talking about loans less than $2,500 down to $100. And that just seems to be a market that the larger institutions are not covering. And so clearly, especially with the immigrant community and with the micro enterprise, small business community, they do not have access to any kind of funds. And if this particular payday lending for the $250 and less, we would hope it to be a little bit more, were to go away, then it's going to force that market to go underground with either unregulated businesses or lenders, fraudulent lenders, or they're going to have to turn to other family resources that's going to dig into family wealth, in which we're trying to oppose. So we want to encourage this board, want to welcome you here to Los Angeles, to really recognize that this is a service that is responding to a need that is badly needed, at least by small, ultra small micro businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barrera. Julian Canete.
Good afternoon. Julian Canetti with the California Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. And prior to my position at the Cal Asian Chamber for about 10 years, I was president and CEO at the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce. One of the things I want to point out, during those years, both with the Cal Asian Chamber and with the California Hispanic Chambers of Commerce, I've worked with payday lending industry representatives as well as public policy makers in Sacramento to answer the needs of consumers, but also at the same time protect our consumers in regards to payday lending. I would urge the council members here, if you have not visited a payday lending, a licensed payday lender here in California, that you do so and understand what they do, who their customers are, and who their employees are, and the jobs that they create in the communities as well. But one of the things is that they provide an important service, and that is access to short-term credit, which is still very needed in our communities, to our small business owners and to consumers throughout. I think an important point here is that if we restrict access to licensed, regulated short-term credit products, we will not reduce the need for those products, but may force individuals into dangerous alternatives. We urge the advisory board to consider how important short-term credit, like payday loans, is for the vast majority of consumers who use it responsibly. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Canetti. Eric Verduzco.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Eric Verduzco Vega. I'm the president and CEO of the South Bay Latino Chamber of Commerce with membership throughout the county of Los Angeles, all the way down to the city of Long Beach. I'd like to echo what our moderator said at the very beginning of today's hearing, which is that one of the missions of the CFPB is to help consumers take control of their financial lives. Without options, which the payday lending institutions give us as consumers and as business owners, we won't be able to take control of those financial lives that we're talking about. I myself and my family, we are immigrants to this country. We took risks in opening businesses, and were it not for these alternative financial institutions, we probably would not have had the money to pay our bills, buy inventory, pay for medical necessities that we had, or other very basic human needs that we had as entrepreneurs. So I do urge you that you not demonize, this alternative financial institutions like the payday lending companies that are here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Verduzco Vega. Craig Wells.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Cordray, the staff members, all of the panelists. Has been a great session. Thank you very much. My name is Craig Wells. I'm the president of a company called Cash Plus. I've been in the trenches in the check cashing and payday advance industry for the last 17 years. And I'd just like to give you one quick example of why customers use our services. If I'm a customer of one of the large banks, a couple of people have mentioned it today, and if I write two checks, two $50 checks, say to a grocery store and a car tune-up place, if I don't have that money in my account, that bank is going to assess me $40 for each one of those checks that bounces. I can go to any one of these licensed operators in California, and I can borrow that same $100 for about $17. Our customers, the reason the demand is so high is they've figured out that $17 is cheaper than $80. Please don't take away the options.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Dina Bridges.
Hi, how are you today? My name is Dina Bridges, and I'm with Cash America Payday Advance. I'm a mentor manager here in California, and I've been with this company for a little over 8 years, and before that I was a customer. So we don't hear a lot of positivity of the payday loan in the industry. We hear a lot of negativity. And some of the positivity is that we help these people every single day. And he was saying before, $17 is a lot cheaper than $80. So we don't want to take away their rights to make the choice in their own life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bridges. Gisela Perez.
Hi, my name is Gisela, and I'm representing Checking and Cash. And as any adult, it is hard to ask for help when they're in a financial bind. And I do believe that customers have the right to have the option open for any financial decision that they do have. I do believe that any customer that does come to us is aware that it's a short-term and affordable option for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Perez. Edgar Enciso.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edgar Enciso, and I've been a Checking and Cash customer, a payday loan company. I just want to share how grateful I've been that I've been able to get these payday loans, being a student that doesn't qualify for federal financial aid. And I found myself in this situation where, it's either go to school or, not, drop your classes and just keep on working. Fortunately, I've had the opportunity to get a payday loan to, further my education. I just would like to have that opportunity to just keep on going to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enciso. Ernest Gillette.
I work for a money service business, payday loan company, Checking and Cash as well. Been there for about 7 years now, and I know that pretty much the decisions of our customer base is solely up to them. I mean, the financial obligations that they have on a monthly basis, obviously we all know that they can be overwhelming at times, and knowing that there is other options out there that they can look forward to or that they can go to rather than family members. There are people out there that don't have family. I, for one, been on my own since 18, and I've been able to have those type of options. I'm also a prior customer, if you would say, as well, where I'm hired today. So definitely consider the option. Payday loans are here, and we just want to move forward and keep, giving these options to our customers and giving these options to pretty much everybody here in society.
Thank you, Mr. Gillette. Clarissa Brock.
Good afternoon. My name is Clarissa Brock. I'm here representing Advance America Payday Loan. I've been in the industry for 13 years. I'm the Divisional Director of Operations. Prior to me working for Advance America, I was a customer, so I'd like to share my story. My car broke down and I didn't have any money or any help to get my car fixed. The banks wouldn't give me a loan. My credit card, I wasn't able to get a credit card because I had less than perfect credit. My credit was derogatory. If it hadn't been for the option of the payday loan, I wouldn't have been able to get my car fixed, and I would probably be unemployed at that time. Now that I'm an employee, I see that our customers use our services and products responsibly. They use our services when they need it, just as I did as a customer.
Thank you, Ms. Clarissa Brock. Ruth Souther.
Thank you for the opportunity. I am a customer of Advance America. And when I had a medical crisis, I'm 71, I had a medical crisis at the end of the month. And of course, everybody knows their budget runs down at the end of the month. And so when I came home from the hospital, it was horribly hot. I had the opportunity to go to Advance of America and have my neighbor go purchase an air conditioner for me. That was several years ago. And since then, I've had other emergencies, not quite as bad as that crisis. But I love the opportunity to know that I have this option to run over to Glendale and Fletcher when I need it and have the opportunity to borrow $250 or $255. Please don't take this option away from me.
Thank you, Ms. Souther. Rosalina Palacios. Amanda Gordon. Alex Vargas.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come down and listen to the panel. Learned a lot today. I know you guys have heard a lot of the stories about how much payday loans have helped the public. I could write a book of how many times I've helped customers with their bills or their car repairs or whatever they need it for. Please don't limit their options. They have no other avenues for short-term credit without a credit check, so please don't limit that. And I hope that we are able to continue helping the public with our payday loans.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Stuart Weissman.
Hi, my name is Stuart Waldman. I am president of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, VICA. We are the business group for the San Fernando Valley. Our companies have over 100,000 employees in the Los Angeles area. This is an important aspect for employees. Cars break, daycare providers need to get paid, and if an employee cannot come to work, not only are they not getting paid, but an employer doesn't have that employee for the day, and their company doesn't go. So we need to have this venue available for employees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. Alessandro Macchi.
Hi. I've done a bunch of research on debt suspension insurance, and I've created a 4-page document, and I'd love to just share it with anybody who'd like to learn more. I think there's been a huge loss of credit ratings for millions of Americans because they could never get fairly priced debt suspension insurance. It was turned into a monopoly in 2002 by the controller of the currency. And so for the last 10 years, they've had a monopoly, and they've overcharged by a factor of 85%. And I know that last summer, the CFPB fined the credit card companies $1 billion for the way they marketed credit suspension insurance. But that has nothing to do with it being overpriced and that people couldn't buy it and have it so that if they did have a reason why they had to miss payments that was legitimate, they wouldn't automatically have their credit rating hurt. And that's what starts the downward spiral. So I've put together on these 4 pages about 10 critical moments in time that have led us to here. And I really believe there's solutions where people could get, where you could literally drop the credit card debt for the country by 2/3, and at the same time convert 2% monthly minimum payments to 5% monthly minimum payments, which the comptroller the Fed tried to do in 2005, but they realized they couldn't because too many people would default. So I'd love to, I'll stick around and I'll hand these out to anybody who might want them.
Mr. Machi, we'd be happy to take your research if you could hand it to Patrick. And thank you very much for your comments. I have an audience participant, but only the first name. Essen.
Good afternoon. My name is Essen. I represent Customer Graphics, and I work for Money Mart, and I'm also a customer. I'd just like to say that when I started my own business, I went to the banks, and they would turn me down. So left that and started going to the payday loans. It's been 6 years now, and I'm not in the payday loans, but because of them, I was able to reach what I call now my American dream. You know, I'm not out of debt. I don't have a credit card. I use their prepaid cards because it puts me in a restriction that if I have my bills, I have to pay them on time. And I don't overspend more than what I have to. So I know that if I ever fall back or I have to do something, the payday loans will ever help me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Essen. I wanted to take a moment to summarize the very rich and varied conversation that we participated in the last 2.5 hours. I think we heard loud and clear that it's important to prepare the marketplace for new Americans. Consumers want safe and affordable products. There are structural barriers, however, that limit access to credit and traditional savings and checking accounts as well. Community engagement is important. It's something that the CFPB has learned well. It's greatly informed all of the work that we do. It's important to provide culturally competent and relevant financial literacy and education options and opportunities. And from our public comments, it's very clear that there is a need for small dollar short-term consumer loans. That concludes the CAB public meeting at the National Japanese American Museum in downtown Los Angeles. Thank you all for taking the time from your busy days to share and to help us understand the issues that you're facing. And thank you to all who watched the hearing by live stream at consumerfinance.gov. Have a great afternoon.
As you think